According to his son Jake, Brian Hemmert went on a hunting trip in Idaho after recovering from a terrible vehicle accident. Brian bravely joined a party of explorers who set off by boat to combat human trafficking in the Caribbean after returning from that. The issue is that Jake Hemmert is a poor liar, as he admits. An elderly man named Paul Hemmert called the Lee County Sheriff's Office on Monday morning, August 28th, in Alva, Florida. He was no longer in contact with his son. A retiree in the neighborhood might request a wellness check to be conducted at the man's home, out of concern that anything had occurred.
What happened the last time you spoke to him over 10 weeks ago?
Well, we had normal communication, and then it just quit. And his son's there with him part of the time. He works on does computer work and is out of town. But I'm not going to say anything more than that at this time. But I have had no communication other than a couple of statements from him that had been in an auto wreck and was injured and was in the hospital. He said would be there for a couple of weeks and then would come home.
Okay, when was that car accident?
It was about 10 weeks. I don't have the exact date. Yes, you do. Huh? Just a second here.
While you're looking, does Brian have any other medical conditions we need to be aware of?
He's 60 years old.
What happens when you call his phone number?
I just get an answering machine. That's all I've ever done.
It rings and then it goes to voicemail?
Yes, every time. And I got his son's number, and the little bit of communication I've had has been through him. Otherwise, it's strictly...
That's your grandson?
Yes.
Okay. What is his name?
It's Jake. I don't communicate much with my grandson. It's always been with my son. We've just been back and forth since he moved there years ago. And we communicate every week, have until this stopped. It just quit with this story that I got from Jake. And it may be everything he says it is, but it's he says the is unwilling to communicate with anybody since the accident. He's okay. He's recovering. He's housebound with a boot on his leg, and I've got different stories. But he will not communicate. He said, but he's not feeling too good, but he's not communicating.
Jake's situation adds a twist that elevates it above a straightforward welfare check on someone who has fallen ill, been hurt, or just lost contact with loved ones. Jake has previously caused problems for the family.
From what I hear from Jake, he's been home for, 6 or more weeks, but he won't talk to anybody but Jake. And my paranoia says if somebody goes to the house, that nobody's going to answer the door. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is if they do, you want to speak to and I would like a one-on-one positive identification that it is. I'm not speaking out of school, but my grandson runs with motorcycle gangs or people. And I just want to make sure there's nothing out of the wrong. That's what I'm trying to find out.
Officers are sent to check on Brian at his residence on Yellow Drive, which is located in a nice gated community. Jake Hemmert greets them and tells them that he has been working on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle in the garage of his house. He informs the authorities that his father is on a hunting trip out of town and is pleasant. He informs them that he last saw the man, a 32-year-old who had just started working as a roofer, when he dropped him off at the Punta Gorda airport. Up until the past year, Jake had resided in Arizona, where he had accrued a number of minor infractions, such as burglary, intimidation, and many driving infractions. He appeared to be flourishing in the fresh surroundings and pleasant sunshine. He was even attempting to start a TikTok channel where he would chronicle the disassembly and restoration of his cherished motorcycle. Jake even greeted the officers as they entered the house and gave them permission to tour the remainder of it, including his father's chamber. With the exception of one room with a hefty lock on the door, they could see everything. According to Jake, his father kept his firearms locked up in that room. Because of Jake's past, he was not permitted to have a key to it. The officers departed, and Jake resumed his normal life. He appeared to be enjoying himself as well. He continued riding his bike, going out to bars and strip clubs, dating, creating TikTok videos, and generally having fun. He was unaware that the police were keeping an eye on his father's and his own finances. Jake appeared to be enjoying himself, and his TikTok channel hadn't gained any traction. The way it was occurring was evident from an examination of Brian Hammer's financial dealings. About $23,000 had been taken out of Brian's accounts in just over 3 months, and efforts had been made to move more money from his retirement plan instead of spending it close to his hunting location. Everything appeared to have been spent locally, close to Alva, Florida, and Jake had also been selling his dad's items on Facebook Marketplace, especially tools, possibly earning over $2,000 in a few transactions. Then there was this rather odd hint. When officers tried to call Brian's number, one answered and left a voicemail, but Brian never returned their call. They were able to determine that Brian's phone was receiving calls from inside the Hammert house after obtaining a search warrant to follow the pings on his phone. The number of coincidences was simply too great to rule out the possibility that something had dropped. Jake was somehow connected and profiting from Brian Hammert. Since they lacked hard proof, investigators began approaching Jake to exert pressure, and eventually he was taken into custody on an outstanding warrant filed by Maricopa County, Arizona. They had the chance to detain the man until Arizona made a decision on whether to extradite him or simply drop the charges, which was before Jake had gone to Florida. While Jake waited in the local jail, something might shake loose. Jake, however, wasn't pleased about being taken into custody on an out-of-state warrant. When the forensic expert and the deputy arrived to take his prints, he was cordial.
Did the headpiece hurt?
Yeah.
Like compared to any, like the other ink?
The worst one so far, surprisingly, was like inside of
I
here.
hear that a lot.
That one was rough. The actual jawline, not the whole throat, but the actual like on the jawline.
Right there on the bone.
And then the head, once you get above like this point, you can feel your brain rattling into your skull, and that was pretty rough.
Yeah, I bet.
That and like upper armpit too was pretty bad.
Yeah.
And like down like lower sternum.
The timing of Jake's arrest has been considered, since it may provide them more time to gather the necessary materials for a comprehensive search warrant on the Hammert property. The following morning, a storm was predicted to strike the region, but its course changed, and a catastrophe was averted. It had altered which court functions were now available.
Well, I'll give you fair warning. I know the clerk of courts and all that's at least closed today.
It is.
What?
Because the storm.
Storm.
Every cop that I've talked to for the last 18 hours told me the exact opposite.
They just closed it last night though at like 7 p.m.
So I've been in custody since 4 o'clock yesterday, and I'm not even gonna get to see it.
They didn't close it till like 8 o'clock
Yeah.
last night. They started running across the bottom. So they didn't lie to you.
So
You gotta be
I just-
fucking kidding me. So I'm just stuck in jail for like the next 3 days?
Probably at least one, bro.
I don't even know what's going on.
You're
Like,
good. And like I said, I don't
I'm
know
not
why you,
good, man.
I don't know anything. I don't even know
I'm
what's
not
on the
okay
paper.
right now. I didn't even know how to warrant until yesterday afternoon. I've been pulled over like 5 times in Florida since 19. Nobody ever gave me any havoc on it.
Jake was placed in a detention cell as detectives and deputies from the Lee County Sheriff's Office rushed to the Hammert residence after the search warrants were approved. He was hoping to get out on bond as quickly as possible for the warrant, but something was lurking in the back of his mind that he was terrified would surface, and it did. However, Jake was unaware of this at the time and had told the cops a fictitious account of his father's whereabouts. He went on to say that his father had returned and asked him to take him to a boat dock a short distance up the coast, where he would be joining a famous person to combat human trafficking in the Caribbean. Detective Robert Patton gets down with Jake to talk about where his father went, even though it was plainly a tall narrative.
We're talking?
Let's do it. What
Okay.
questions you got this morning?
Okay, well, obviously, where'd we leave off?
Left off, you guys were searching the house, I think,
Uh-huh.
and that was kind of the end of our conversation.
Right, we were searching the house, and your version of what happened was you dropped them off on a boat. right? Is there anything from the version that you provided to us about the plane trip to the boat, those two? Is there anything else you want to change, alter, modify? Stick with that version? So anything else that you can think of that will help us corroborate that, back that up, helps us understand.
It was a couple months ago. It was super early in the morning. I have short-term memory loss. I don't know what else to tell you.
Okay. Can you describe the boat further?
It was big. It was white. It had the steering wheel on the upper deck, and the guy that was on the boat that I could see kind of looked like Matt Bracken, but I didn't think.
Who's Matt Bracken? I don't know.
So my dad's a pretty big conspiracy theory nut. Matt Bracken wrote a book about 20 years. He's a retired Navy SEAL. He wrote a book about 20 years ago called "Enemies Foreign and Domestic."
Okay.
Basically, if we ever got invaded, he was one of the guys that decided to leave the country after January 6th because the feds were coming for him.
Okay.
And it kind of looked like him.
Okay.
He was the only other person that I saw on the boat.
Okay. No one else?
But from everything else that because I've watched a bunch of those videos on, I thought that Matt had already left the country and that he was a sailboat guy. So I don't think that could have been him.
Yeah, because generally people that like blowboats don't like power boats.
Yeah.
They're very unique that way, people that are into boats. Some like the engine and some like to go by the wind. They don't usually go back and forth.
But I do know that Bracken just happened to be in Panama like 3 weeks ago, which would kind of make sense.
Jake attempts to tighten the plot a little bit, but the story is unrealistic and should be let to unfold naturally.
I don't know what the man is doing. Obviously, he's making this very difficult for everybody right now. He's had a couple rough years. I honestly don't know if he's gonna come back, to be honest with you.
Really?
Really. Between his sister, between the country falling apart, between his dad constantly hiding stuff from him, between his dad constantly choosing Bonnie over him. It was either that or we were actually going to go to Idaho and he was going to go disappear off in the woods and go be with the Lord and do whatever he was going to do. And I was just like, I don't know what to tell you, Bobs. I mean, the only thing he told me, he said, if I'm not back by December, you can go ahead and file missing persons. He said, my will and everything's in the safe. Everything's yours. Give your sister some stuff if you want. That's the last thing he said to me when I dropped him off.
Detective Patton follows the narrative and changes his course. He questions Jake about all of the recent expenditure.
You know, I mean, there's all sorts of pictures. I'm not gonna bring in all of them, but I mean, ATMs. I mean, you're pulling money like crazy. You're transferring the money. You said about 30 grand. Okay, that's a lot of money in a short period of time for somebody that just went out on a trip and is supposed to come back. To me, it seems like more that this trip that he went on, you know he's not coming back.
I'm pretty afraid he's not coming back, yes.
Right. Well, I think it's a little bit more than, I think you know he's not coming back.
I don't know for sure.
How many people have been over to your house in the since June? How many people have come over to the house?
I think 4 girls. And then 2 guys from Facebook Marketplace.
And don't forget about the guy that came over and sold you the weed. So, and we talked to the folks that had come over as well. selling your dad's tools. So that too kind of suggests to me that you know you're selling off his tools.
Yeah. We had that conversation before he left. We'll sell everything in the garage.
So again, it kind of goes back to the fact that this trip, you knew he wasn't coming back.
I don't know why you keep making assumptions, sir.
Well, because obviously we've kind of done a little bit more of our homework and we've been doing a little bit more research. Okay? You know that. We're not stupid. I mean, you know I've done a lot of research. Now, the question I have is, how far do you want to continue to go with this and tell us that you went on a trip when we know that's not true? There comes a time and a place, Jake, when we're going to have to actually acknowledge, admit, or explain what happened. You know that you know he didn't go on a trip. I know that. You know that. Okay? We know that's complete bullshit. Now, it's up to you what you want to do and explain. Explain to us what really happened. We can sit here and talk about all these other things, but the issue is at hand. You know you're not coming back because you know you never left. We know that. But the question is, what does Jake want to tell us happened?
Before he can get out of it and tell another lie, Jake realizes that he is caught in his own lies.
The man that took you in, allowed you to stay in his house, and probably the only one that cared about you. Tell us what happened to you. What's that a picture of?
A room full of stuff.
Yep. What's under that stuff?
A freezer.
Yep. A freezer that you ordered on June 22nd, 2023. What's in the freezer, Jake? What happened, Jake?
Same thing that happens to apparently everybody in our family.
What's that?
Took his life and I didn't know how to handle it.
Explain.
It was that night. Dead asleep. I heard a boom go off in his room. Woke up. Ran over. Turned the light on. 45 was on the floor and there was blood everywhere.
Where's the 45?
Should have been in the closet right next to the sink.
So we
And I was so afraid because I knew I had a warrant out. I didn't know that there was two. My life was a complete and total mess. I'd pretty much given up on everything. So I knew that if I called the cops that they would probably try to blame me anyway. Or at least take me to jail. So I sat there and had a panic attack for a couple hours. Ordered the freezer. took my tiny butt, everything that I had for like 4 hours to try to roll him into the freezer. And I just tried to pretend that everything was okay.
Jake would continue by explaining how he removed the mattress from the bed, replaced the headboard, and stored the mattress's components in the house's attic. And they talked about how Jake had the area arranged to accommodate the freezer he had purchased and concealed under supplies. Its graphic contents would reveal the location of Brian Hammer's final resting place and the lengths his son would go to in order to hide what had transpired.
What was Jake's end game?
I didn't have an end game, obviously. There was no end game. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I should have called the cops when it fucking happened.
A simple call to 911, and we wouldn't have been here. If people found their loved one dead, it happens every day. We find that every day. It happens. That people will just call 911. Okay? They don't go on a spending spree for weeks and spend almost 30 grand. But it all comes back to the time when himself. And then all that changes. The bank activity. The transfers from retirement. So you realize that to some that would look,
Suspicious.
yeah. And the problem I still have with himself is I've also been doing this for a while. That doesn't line up well. It's not really possible for somebody to shoot themselves like that because of the distance. You have to think of other things that happen when guns are fired and the powder burns and stuff like that. That doesn't match up. So you're kind of going down that road of trying to make more and continue down a road of not telling the truth. You know that and I know that. You're not going to be able to. Huh?
I am finally telling the truth.
No, I don't think you are on that. It doesn't line up. It's not possible. How am I... But switch roles, Jake. How am I supposed to sit here and listen to, from before to now, how many lies, and now all of a sudden I'm supposed to just go, okay, now he's telling me the truth, and believe you? You understand how that would be hard for me to do. But then I look at the science behind it and trajectory of it. That doesn't add up. That doesn't line up. I know that, and you know that. How do you contradict that?
I'm a scientist.
Hmm?
I'm not a detective.
I mean, everything points to the fact that Dad was laying in bed. Yeah, he was. He was laying in his bed, and you walked in, and you shot him. You shot him, and then stole from him. Because it all goes back to that time when it all abruptly changes on June 19th. And you switch for the Facebook, you switch the banking, all of that switches. And then the activity. It all results right back to that time period. That's not somebody that's grieving. That's somebody that's breeding off of money.
Lied about a lot of shit in my life. Done a lot of dumb stuff in my life. But I absolutely would never harm. We'll take that to my fucking grave. Do whatever you want to me.
As he continues to talk and as he feels the urge to let go, the truth will finally come to light, and he will eventually spin himself into a corner.
Himself. I don't. Because their timeline and everything almost matches up. But it actually happens sooner. I think you're off by 24 hours.
No, I definitely ordered the freezer like 4 or 5 hours after the gunshot. I don't think I'm off by 24 hours.
Okay.
But I can't remember.
I never put it on this earth to call another man a liar, but you sure make that hard for me, Jake. Because
About a lot of things.
you,
To you.
yeah, yeah, and I keep finding each lie and keep defeating each lie and continue in this. But you're gonna sit there and try to maintain themselves. I know that's not true, Jake. We know that.
It's completely true. You can believe me or not, I really don't give a shit at this point. I don't.
Despite the facts and common sense, he continues to insist that this is not his fault and that he would never kill his father in cold blood.
Left-handed or right-handed?
Right-handed. Just semi-ambidextrous, but mostly right-handed. Not right-handed.
But he uses left-handed himself.
There's nothing.
Right. Well, Jake, what am I supposed to think?
Yeah, I've already made up your mind. You are Mr. Fancy Detective. You know all.
No, I don't claim to know all. But I do think that I'm a little bit better than the average. And that doesn't add up. But what does add up? Dad sleeping in bed and you walking up and shooting him. It does.
That didn't happen, so.
Well, you certainly made it hard
For anybody
us.
to ever believe that.
Yes.
I'm aware.
Jake is constantly caught in the liar's paradox. Anything they say after confessing to lying could be interpreted as a lie going ahead. Despite being aware that he has been discovered, he makes every effort to stick the landing. He can do this by accepting responsibility for something that falls under his falsehoods. He accepts responsibility for his admissions in the hopes that nothing further will happen.
I'll admit to doing a lot of shitty things in my life, but I'm never going to admit to the fact that no, I did not hurt. And I've got priors for theft and stupid stuff. I've never been violent in my entire life. I think that would be the first violent thing that I would ever do is completely insane. You've got your case. Jury's probably going to find me guilty anyway, so. You want a detective? I did not kill my father. I'm not ever gonna say anything different on that one. You obviously found it through all my other lies. You're good. You are good, but I'm also a shitty liar, so.
You take a polygraph?
Do you want to take a polygraph?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. No, I don't know.
It's up to you.
Not particularly, no.
Jake would eat breakfast, and the question of whether he killed his father was simply waiting to be answered, along with the impending polygraph. At last, the man opens up and shares more of the truth.
I was so afraid to see the blood or anything, but put the pillow between his neck. I fired it one time. His body flinched. It was gone.
Sorry, Jake, clear it out.
The truth shall set you free. But you gotta be honest. You know the lying's gotta stop. It's gotta be weighing on you. I know it's been tearing you up.
That's the whole truth. You can believe that or not, I don't fucking care. That man is all I had. And I would have never done this unless he wanted.
But you do understand that people are gonna have a hard time believing they wanted him to shoot. You understand that. I know what you're telling me. It doesn't matter what I think, it doesn't matter. But you understand what other people think, right? I know. But I'm being honest with you. If I didn't say that to you,
I'm going to prison for a long time or forever regardless. Now that I admitted that, like, it doesn't matter, man. You know?
well, Jake, I mean, I understand that, but you understand everything else. So the
I
possibility.
don't care what anybody else thinks. It's like, it doesn't matter, man. It's all I had.
Is there anything else that you've told me? Anything else you want to change? Anything?
Well, it was all a lie until 5 minutes ago.
I know. I'm just saying,
What?
is there anything else? I'm just asking. Is there anything else? Anything else you want to get off your chest?
In accordance with Brian's instructions, he would take the freezer and his father out west, rent an Airbnb, cremate the man's bones, and scatter his ashes on Mount St. Helen, where he said his father had been during the 1980 volcanic eruption. Jake Hemmert would ultimately enter a not guilty plea and be convicted of second-degree murder with a firearm, tampering with evidence, abusing a human body, and using a credit card fraudulently. He was given a 30-year prison term with a minimum of 25 years in prison.